all about questioning whether people actually did it. So this is the groupthink. This is the mindset, and this is an intelligent guy. That I'm not picking on him, but my point is that's the best of the best, and it's all downhill from there. Now, as far as this Danny story, one of the reasons we think he did it is basically because they kept telling us that he did it, and there were leaks and calculated leaks, tremendous array of leaks up to the trial, and so the public mind was basically set, and the pool from which the jurors were drawn, even though they insisted they could be fair, they had all already made up their mind, because you had to be living on the moon not to know that these guys did it, because we were told that again and again. Now, one of the ways we were told that was that some events transpired shortly before one brother was killed and the other one supposedly escaped. And that was that a private police officer at MIT was shot, and then some hours later we heard that that there had been a carjacking, and it gradually came out right at the same time that there was this supposed gun battle with the brothers, that the carjacking victim had escaped from the car and had told police that he had been carjacked by a man who had identified himself as the Boston bomber, and he also announced that he had just shot an MIT cop. Now, I have to say that in my quarter century or more of covering crime and things like that, I'm not going to say there aren't people who brag about crimes, because there are some, but when people are in a panic and they're seeking to flee and they have a gun and they have already commandeered somebody with their car, they're not necessarily looking to give their hostage additional reasons to act irrationally or to panic them. All they wanted to do, really, if they did, and we are not even sure that story is correct, was to get out of the Boston area and get out with their lives, okay? And so here they already had their own car. Now, you can argue that they didn't want to use their own car because they were afraid that their plates had been made and so on. Okay, so they take another car. Now, they take this guy as a hostage because they don't want him running to the police. Fine. But then this guy announces, oh, and by the way, I'm wanted more than you could possibly imagine, and you are now famous. I mean, why would you do that? You wouldn't want the guy having any such thoughts. And so that didn't make any sense to me. And I began investigating this story, and it took me months and months and months of going back and forth to where I started seeing inconsistencies in the stories that this guy nicknamed Danny had told the media. I also was instantly fascinated that they were masking his identity. They were not saying who this witness was, and it wasn't clear why they were masking his identity, because in normal situations where the perpetrators have been brought to account and we were told there were no other Confederates, you don't have any reason to hide the person's identity. But they hid his identity, and B, they made him available for interviews with selected particular close friends of the security state within the media. And I mean, for example, John Miller of CBS, whose prior job had been as the chief spokesman of the FBI. And so these people, their entire careers are based on chummy relationships with a particular group of actors, and cooperating with whatever they want you to do. And that's John Miller, that's some of these other people. They're the only ones who were allowed to interview this guy, and he had a handler. Boston Globe supposedly found him on their own, and he had a handler. He had a professor of criminology who, for some inexplicable reason, was controlling interfaces with this young man. And I should tell you, I figured out who he was, and I tried to interview him, and I was blocked by this criminologist, who I find to be a very suspicious character, and if I may say so, and if he wants to take issue with me on that, then let him take issue with me. But I found him to be a very suspicious character. Northeastern University, where he teaches, has billions of dollars of contracts with the security state. There are literally, Ricky, hundreds and hundreds of things like what I'm telling you that are wrong with this Boston story, and the public knows basically none of them unless they routinely read Who, What, Why.
Are you talking about Jamie Foxx? Is that the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And John Miller is also the guy who said that he wrote a confession. The younger brother wrote a confession on the boat, right? Was that ever, because that was another thing that if you get in a conversation with somebody, that's usually one of the things that get brought up pretty quickly is that, well, he confessed, he wrote it on the boat.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there are real questions as to exactly what happened, and who wrote what, and when it was discovered, and whether he wrote it, and what was written was in fact a confession. And again, I mean, we assembled a whole team at Who, What, Why, and some of them are experienced journalists, and some of them are just really smart, talented, young volunteer researchers, and we all dug into that. And again, as I said at Who, What, Why, we did 80 articles, and in those articles you could find 2 or 3 about that so-called confession. Our person who did that story, who knows the Quran and so on and so forth, concluded that was not a confession, that was the kind of thing that somebody might just write when they were bored and trapped somewhere, or feared for their life or something else. And so there are many, many issues about that so-called confession that we have not heard.
Yeah, and being from Massachusetts, the local radio stations, WEI, and a bunch of them were basically they had 24/7 talk about the Boston bombing and what was going on in an investigation. And I remember when they found him in the boat, they shot up that thing. I mean, it didn't seem like they were trying to let him out alive because they didn't know if he was armed. I understand that, but I remember they were talking about they found him in a boat and all this, and then all of a sudden you just hear just gunshots like crazy, and I'm just like, wow, they're not. I mean, it just seemed like they weren't concerned about him going to trial and him getting out alive.
Well, that's another thing that demands investigation. If we're not troubled by the fact that a person who had not been convicted or charged with anything yet, who was believed to be hiding somewhere, who had not fired a single shot, if we think it's okay for law enforcement to fire more than 100 shots at that person, I mean, we got something really wrong with ourselves. I would just say this: anybody listening to this program, try to imagine that your child or your sibling or your parent, somebody had claimed that they had done something, and they were in their workshop, or they were in a garden shed, or wherever they were, and the police showed up, and the police fired 100 shots into that unit. Do you want to tell me you're okay with that? You want to tell me you don't think there should be an investigation about whether these people really should be allowed to even have guns, or what kind of training do they have, or what kind of coordination goes on? The fact, again, as with these other things I mentioned, that there's nobody's held responsible for any of this. None of this is investigated or looked into. I mean, it just means that we, as a society, we have no standards and we don't care.
Yeah, but I did, in regard to go back to that gas station videotape, something that seemed kind of, I guess, it kind of made sense to me was the fact, or it didn't make sense to me, I should say, was the brother going into the gas station and casually shopping, and I don't know if did you watch that videotape
absolutely, and I will agree with you that if the FBI and the whole world is hunting for you, okay, it is improbable, number one. It's improbable that you're going to go into a convenience store brimming with people and cameras. Okay, number one, presumably they left their homes and they did all this stuff. If they were going to be on the road, they would have maybe, grabbed something or eaten something, but you're exposing yourself ridiculously by doing that. And as you point out, the guy shops for like several minutes, like he's thinking about does he want the potato chips with or without ruffles or whatever you call them, ridges. I mean, I'm sorry. I think any serious person looking at that and comparing that to other people who are fleeing would say this is not the normal behavior of a terrorist or of a person who is panicked and is on the run. So there's that. Now, there are other things at the gas station. On Who, What, Why, we ran a 2-part series on Danny, and I discovered that Danny told 3 different versions of his story. Now, this is very similar to the Lee Harvey Oswald thing, by the way, where there were multiple stories, and then finally the media and the government all settled on one narrative, and they kept repeating that one narrative until the public and everyone else just, stopped even being aware that there had been other explanations, and they were never forced to reconcile them. But basically, the narrative that nobody even remembers practically the Danny story, but those who do may remember that Danny said that the way he escaped was that the brothers needed gas, and they pulled into this gas station, and that one brother got out and went in to pay. For some reason, they couldn't pay at the pump, and then the other brother sat next to him, and that he was fiddling with the GPS and had put the gun down for a moment, and that this Danny bolted. That's the so-called official story. But we found another interview he gave earlier, I guess before his friend from Northeastern started steering him around, and he told a different story. And he said that one brother went inside to pay, and that the other brother was standing outside the car with the gas nozzle. Now, again, here are these murderous people, and they've carjacked a guy, and they leave him alone in the car. I mean, he could have started honking, he could have locked her, who knows? I mean, there are so many issues with that. That's just not it's not the way you would think of as very motivated, calculating criminal types. And so that story was the first story he told, but it disappeared. By the way, there was another story he told somewhere where he basically indicated that nobody carjacked him at all, that they took his car, but that they just left him. He got out of his car and they took off. Now, if you wonder why a guy would tell 3 different stories and why one story would survive, it's obvious that the story that survived was the best story, because the other stories, if he was asked about that, or those stories were to survive, they would not paint the picture that needed to be painted of these brothers.
Yeah, but the thing about the gas station is that the casualty shopping didn't make sense. But if I remember it correctly, didn't Danny get out of the car or vehicle or SUV, whatever it was, ran away, and then the other brother came to the door at the gas station of the convenience store and said something to him. Then he put all the things that he had, basically that he was going to buy, put it down, and then ran out. Didn't that kind of seem consistent with, I guess, somebody who carjacked somebody?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not gonna say. I'm gonna give you something completely fanciful, let's say, and theoretical. But as I say, I've covered so many of these things, and in my book, Family of Secrets, which has a lot about the Kennedy assassination, the real story of Lee Harvey Oswald and his own documented relationship with the FBI and the CIA was all covered up. And so when you know that that there are other possible explanations. If we accept that Tamerlan Tsarnaev had a prior relationship with the FBI, and we know that now they are presumably in a car with another guy, we don't know what the actual relationship is. So maybe, I'm just saying, maybe, whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen. Maybe they were supposed to put a dummy bomb somewhere and something went wrong, and they were told now to just get out of New York, and that they were supposed to go in this guy's car. And, if these 2 brothers trusted him, which is the indication by the actual behavior of both brothers getting out of the car and one going in. But if he got out of the car and he ran across the street and the elder brother saw him run and they had been told that they were supposed to somehow interact with this man, the elder brother would say, what the heck is going on? And he'd run to the brother and say, let's get out of here. Something is up.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. That actually makes, I never thought of it that way, but that actually does kind of make sense. And I know it sounds like an elaborate story and it sounds pretty insane, but